A few weeks ago, Karl Taylor released a video about deep parabolics and how they're not true parabolic modifiers. I don't disagree with that, but is it really a scam? Let's talk about it. What is up, YouTube? Anthony back with another video. And first and foremost, I want to say Happy New Year. It is 2021. We escaped the year that felt like it was never going to end. Let's have a lot of positivity in this year. Let's leave all the craziness and the negativity in 2020 and let's have a much better year. So again, Happy New Year to you. So jumping into the video, we are talking deep parabolics. Now, as I mentioned in the intro video, Karl Taylor had released a video a few weeks ago about deep parabolic modifiers and how they're not true parabolics and they are essentially a waste of money. Now, I own a handful of deep parabolic modifiers, and for me personally, I did not buy them because I was expecting them or I had this thought, notion, whatever, that they were indeed true parabolic modifiers. Really, I saw that myself as a marketing thing, as Karl Taylor mentioned in the video. But I did expect those modifiers to focus the light and tunnel that light in a more narrow beam than a typical Octabox or a beauty dish. So after watching that video, because I was definitely interested, because I bought deep parabolic modifiers, so I was intrigued. After watching that video, I thought, I want to see the true difference between a deep parabolic and an Octabox in regards and respect to what I was expecting the modifier to do, and that was to focus that light more. So that's what we're going to go over in this video. I've got some examples. I did all the pictures early this morning because video would have just went on and on if I would have recorded that. So I've taken all the pictures. We'll walk through everything and I'll explain everything. And let's look at the examples and let's see what the differences are. Now, before we jump into that, let me say a couple things. First of all, it's not going to be a true apples to apples because I don't have a deep parabolic and Octabox that are the exact same size. So for this demonstration, the deep parabolic is a 28-inch, the Octabox is a 25-inch. Now, in real world, it actually is only about 1.5 inches difference in size. I'm not exactly sure how where they measure their modifiers because none of them are quite as big as the label of the actual modifier. So it is only about 1.5 inches difference. So it isn't anything crazy, but I do want to point out that they are different sizes. So you don't need to go in the comments and say, oh, it's not the same comparison, blah, 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 because they're not the same size. I get it. But for all intent and purposes, they're practically the same size. Isn't going to make that big of a difference. So that's number one. Number two, for both modifiers, I have the deflector plate in, and I essentially did that because I wanted to eliminate any hot spot in the center. For this test, I'm really looking at light spread, not so much light intensity. And so I really didn't want there to be like these big hot spots right in the center, especially when I was shooting without diffusion. So I put the deflector plate in for both, and I have the deflector plate equal distance from the flash in both modifiers. And essentially what I'm trying to see is, again, the spread of light. I want to see if a deep parabolic modifier has a more narrower spread of light than that of a similar size Octabox. That is what this demonstration is for. It is not to get into anything about parabolicness, if that's even a word, or anything like that. This is pure light spread. Karl Taylor has already explained that deep parabolic modifiers are not true parabolics based off the sheer shape of it alone. Science says that they're not true parabolics. I don't think anyone can argue with that. What I am arguing with is that they're completely pointless. That's what I want to see, and that's what we're going to look at right now. Okay, so jumping in, we have 4 images here. So on the top left, we have the 25-inch Octa with no diffusion. Bottom left, we have the 25-inch Octa with diffusion. Top right, we have the 28-inch deep pair, no diffusion. And bottom right, we have the 28-inch deep pair with diffusion. Now, for all of these examples, this is the order that they'll be in. They are labeled, but just in case, the order stays the same. So for this first one, I have the modifier 1 foot away from the wall, and I measured the foot from the front of the modifier. So because the deep para is a physically bigger modifier, it is technically further away. The light itself is further away from the wall than the light in the quick octa, simply because of the depth and size of the modifier. So that should be a given, but I just thought I would explain that. So jumping in, when we look at the ones with no diffusion, it is clear that the deep parabolic is, it has a more narrow field, a more narrow spread of light. It's very clear. You could see over here with the octa, it is much bigger than that here. And so that was good to see. That's what I was expecting to see, and that was good. What you will find, though, that is interesting is when you come down to the diffusion, there's not much of a difference in terms of the spread. Now, I do think the gradation and light fall off is a little bit smoother with the deep para, but in terms of light spread in general, they are the same. So let's move to 2 feet. And again, we will see that with no diffusion, the spread of light is definitely more narrow with the deep octa or with the deep parabolic than it is with the quick octa. But when we come down to the diffusion, again, that spread is very similar. I do continue to feel that the gradation is a little smoother with the deep para, but other than that, the spread is relatively the same. So if we move to 3 foot, same thing, much wider spread of light. But when you come down to diffusion, it's roughly the same. I then move them 4 feet, again, the same. I then moved it 5 feet. And then I moved it 6 feet. And I didn't mention, but for all of these up through 6 foot, the speed light was at half power. Now I did keep the power the same between the diffusion and no diffusion, just to keep that part constant. Because again, I wasn't really looking at for intensity of light or proper exposure. I really was just looking at spread of light. And because the flash itself is the only thing that is creating light in this parking garage, all I wanted to see was the spread. So again, this is 6 feet. Now I then moved it to 8 feet. Now when I took it back to 8 feet, I did increase the flash power to full power simply because it was so far away. Half power just really wasn't kicking any light. You could still see the same. It didn't change the spread. It really just changed the intensity. So I thought for just being able to see it purposes, I just upped it to full power. So we can see at 8 feet again. You can clearly see when you look at the sign here, the handicap sign for on the deep para versus over here, you know, the spread is significantly bigger. Now you can see here, this is caused by the deflector plate. You could also see what's interesting over here is for the deep para, the deflector plate, you can see it, but it is nowhere near as pronounced as the quick octa. So that was interesting to see. When we come down to the diffusion, again, there is no difference. And last I went 10 feet. I wasn't able to get the 10-foot diffusion on the deep para because the batteries died in the speed light, and I was too lazy to go get new batteries because this was literally the last shot that I was planning to take. But it would have been the same thing. I mean, at this point, it's very clear. And if I run back through again real quick, so here's 1 foot, here's 2 foot, 3 feet, 4 feet, 5 feet, 6 feet, 8 feet, 10 feet. So very clear that without diffusion, there is a difference in the light spread. And I don't remember Karl Taylor's video specifically, but I do think he did mention that there was a bit of a difference between his modifiers that he was using when there wasn't any diffusion. But the minute that you put that diffusion on, all properties of that more narrow beam of light goes out the window. And this clearly illustrates that. So if you are the type of shooter that always diffuses your light, then yes, there isn't much of a difference between having a regular Octabox and a deep parabolic. And like he mentioned in his video, the deep parabolic modifiers are definitely heavier. They're definitely bigger. So, you know, if you're not really getting any benefit in terms of light quality, light spread, really light softness, then there really isn't any point to use a heavier modifier. Really, you want to use as light of a modifier as you can, especially when you're putting the thing high, even more so when you're booming. When you are booming modifiers, you definitely don't want to use a modifier that's heavier than it needs to be. So, you know, in that instance, yeah, I do think deep parabolic modifiers in a lot of regards are not there's no benefit. There's really no point in having them. Now, I can't speak for any other brand because I don't have any other brand, but for the Glow brand, the deep parabolic modifier isn't any more expensive than a similar size quick octa or beauty dish. So in that regards, I don't really see it as being quote unquote a scam because they're not charging more money simply because it's a deep parabolic or because it's a parabolic. If they were charging more money because it was a parabolic, then scam would be the right word to use, but that's not the case at all. So you could definitely say marketing if you want to, but it's not a scam. Again, not from the Glow brand, but definitely in looking at these results, I can 100% say if you are using any sort of diffusion on those modifiers, there really is no benefit in having the deep para. Now, I will say, I think there's some versatility in having it in that, you know, if you really are in a situation where you need that light to be more focused, and that's more important than necessarily trying to diffuse the light, then absolutely, it's nice to have the deep para that you can use to really funnel that in when you're shooting it with no diffusion. But if that's not a situation that you ever think you would be in, I would definitely say it really isn't worth it to get the deep paras. And I can say for me, yeah, after all of this, I'm a little bummed that I bought them. Not because it was more of a cost, but because they definitely are heavier. When I use these things outside, you know, the wind it definitely catches them. And so it would be easier to have a regular one. So, you know, I don't really have a lot of overlap in size between them. So there are cases where I need a particular size and I only have it in a deep octa or a deep para. So, you know, that's kind of a bummer. You know, I didn't think about that when I bought these things. You know, I just was thinking more narrow beam of light. Didn't really think about what diffusion would do to that. That's my fault. It happens. So that is that. Hopefully this was useful and these examples really illustrated the differences between the two. So yeah, if you have any questions, comments, whatever, definitely drop those down below. I love to read those things and respond to them. And yeah, if you like it, like it. If you want to subscribe, subscribe. If you don't. Doesn't really matter. And yeah, so that is that. So I'm looking forward to doing more videos like this in 2021. I am planning to finally start a podcast again. I've done them in the past before. I was weighing for many, many months last year to start it, and it just never happened. But I think a podcast is a better platform for some of the videos that I've done where it's really just more me talking. I think a podcast would serve better for that. So in 2021, I definitely plan to do more videos like this where I'm doing demonstrations or I'm doing behind the scenes or I'm doing how-tos, or eventually when things aren't as crazy and I can get back to shooting with people, I hope to make content with behind the scene photo shoots as well. So let's hope that comes at some point. California is really far behind in terms of everything with the pandemic stuff. So it is what it is. So I hope you've been safe. Continue to stay safe. Continue to stay well. And until the next video, take care.